What's up, everybody? It's Now That's Debatable. Welcome to the show. We have our ever loved and welcomed guest Morpheus on today, and we're going to be talking about free will. As we jump into that, I'm going to just leave our title screen up for a second while I adjust some things in the background. And before we take off, if AAA, you'd like to go ahead and give our shout out to Relic Media and get that out of the way. I'm going to mute myself, adjust this. I'll be back in momentarily. I've got our faces up on the screen. We'll get this thing started off.
Yeah, Relic Media is a new streaming service that we've partnered with to get our off the no view list, and is been helping us. So if you have a new young podcast, you're struggling to get listeners, hit us up or contact Relic Media directly, and we can get you part of Relic Media family. So with no further ado, the topic today is free will versus determinism. So I'll just be upfront. I don't believe in any kind of free will whatsoever. And so, Morpheus, you're undecided, or do you think you control your destiny, or what?
I think I would start off by saying that this topic does seem to be somewhat of a catch-22, although I think that as it currently stands, I am for free will and in opposition of determinism. So I think one thing we should do, probably so we don't start straw man attacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about I lay out my understanding of this specific metaphysical subject,
Okay.
and then, because I'm not sure how much you delved deep into this. I know I studied the most extreme version of this with Spinoza in college, which is called necessitarianism.
Mhm.
And so maybe I'll just lay out a quick kind of three-point term definition, if you will. So starting with the most extreme in this specific metaphysical subject, you have necessitarianism. Necessitarianism is most famously known by Spinoza, which asserts that there can only be one causal chain. Determinism is a subset of that, if you will, that says you can have multiple causal chains.
Mhm.
So that's the main difference between the two. Compatibilism says that you can have both free will and determinism, and then, free will tends to be something that's understood as being detached from determinism. I think in my understanding of it is both a deterministic, let me see how to say this. In my understanding, or at least the way I would conceive of it, is existence both has deterministic elements and it has free will elements. And so we all have deterministic elements that we deal with.
Mhm.
And then you also have the free will elements. And so that's kind of just like would you at least agree on those basic definitions and terms?
I mean, I'll agree with the definitions. Hey, hold on. Hey, quiet. Right. Okay. So yeah, I agree with the definitions, but I mean, when you said that people have, I'm sorry. I'm gonna turn this off. All right. So yeah, I said I'll accept the definitions, but I don't accept some of the things you say. Like there's some things that are in the domain of free will and some things are in the domain of determinism. It sounds like that's kind of like what you had stated.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I reject all of that. I think everything is within the domain of determinism.
So the reason why I don't agree with you is for probably two or three like main positions.
Okay.
So let me just give you an example. There are many functions that we rely on biologically that we don't think about. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Like, for instance, you don't think about having your heart beat. every 25 seconds.
Nope, I do not.
And so there's a whole substructure of what you would consider deterministic biological functions that you don't control.
Mhm.
In that sense, that's deterministic to me. There's also a whole subset of physical phenomenon that if you were to come in contact with, you'd have no control over. That's also deterministic. But when
Sure.
it comes to the higher cognitive functions,
I think there's an assumption that you're making though.
what is
Right.
that?
Because that the something is determined doesn't mean that you don't have any control over it. So like you can wield control over it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're having free will. Like wielding control over something is you're impacting your environment, you're interacting with it. Right. So like I'm controlling my fingers, but that doesn't mean that I have free will.
So
Are you tracking?
I would say that based off of the Stanford definition of philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you are in contradiction to their definition of determinism.
Nope. I'm not.
Because it
So-
sounds like what you're telling me is you're a compatibilist.
No, I'm not. So to me, compatibilism is just determinism with extra stuff. Like, so when you get down to the nuts and bolts with compatibilism, they're saying that you feel like you have the sensation of free will, but that you don't actually do. That's just
So if your definition of determinism is just the right calculus prior to an outcome,
Mhm.
and if that calculus is accounted for, if all the variables within that calculus is accounted for, then the outcome will always be the same. Then I can kind of see where you have a point there,
Mhm.
but there's a difference between something you don't control with your mind and something you're actively controlling with. There's also a difference between the idea of value in a system of values, which requires agency and choice and potential, and just a mathematical calculation of an outcome based off of variables. Those two things are different in part because, a determinist would say that if the agent, and even saying agent there is somewhat problematic, but
Mhm.
if the agent goes through the calculus of a specific conceptual framework for, let's just say, a specific moral ethic, like consequentialism, for instance,
Mhm.
that every time that agent makes that effort, the outcome is going to be one that is what would be determined by the agent. The issue
So-
is that a lot of times the
Can-
outcome is not.
Can I give you just a little just about my view?
Sure.
So for me, like causality is a thing, right? Would you acknowledge
100%.
that?
Oh, of
Right.
course.
So, yeah.
But that's physics, in my opinion. That's not
Yeah. Everything's
values.
physics. Everything's physics.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, once you get down to it, like biology is just when you break it down, it's just chemistry. And
Are
chemistry, break it
conceptual
down, it's just
frameworks physics? Are conceptual frameworks physics?
No, things that exist.
So that's not everything. Now you were very
well,
critical of Jordan Peterson saying
okay,
everything,
hold on.
and now you're doing the same thing.
No. A conceptual
Great example of my point earlier
conceptual
today.
framework. Let's not bring like phone conversations into the podcast. Okay, so
Okay, good point. Good.
a conceptual framework is not a thing that actually exists. You can't touch it. It's a concept. Right?
You can't touch a conceptual framework. What? So tell me this. Because the reason why I say this is interesting because
So
no. This is a serious point here. If we don't acknowledge this, then we're in trouble. You're saying you can't touch a conceptual framework. A conceptual framework is a series of cognitive synapses in the brain that you represent in.
No, it's not.
a
No,
thought.
it's not. No, it's not. So there are synapses in it. So when I think of a conceptual framework, there are synapses in my brain going on. Right? And stop. Hold on, stop. Facade can think of the same structural framework, but there are different synapses in his brain that are going on. So the state of my brain is not the state of his brain, even though we may be thinking of the same thing. That's what I'm saying. This is conceptual. This is not something that actually exists.
So then it's not deterministic, because if it was deterministic, it would be
No, that has nothing
the
to do.
same zeros and ones.
No, it wouldn't. It is. How does that follow? That's a non sequitur.
Because no, that's not non sequitur.
No. It's just you're okay. You're saying so. When let's say I think of the concept of
Consequentialism. Let's just use that.
consequentialism, right? And when I think of that, my brain, neurons in my brain are doing something, and the neurons in Fasad's brains are doing something differently.
Why? It's physics.
No. Therefore, there's free will.
So tell me
that's what
this.
you said.
There you go. There you go. Because if it was physics, it would be the same for both you and Fasad.
No,
That's-
it's not. That's not the case at all. Why,
So
why
physics doesn't
no.
matter.
Well, okay, why would? Okay, why
Yeah,
would
if I bust a window with a rock and I bust it with a baseball, did the physics change?
No, that's not the
Is
argument.
the outcome the same?
What I'm saying is
it's
that.
kinda, it's very
But I'm saying-
it's the same, bro.
Well, no. Flight. Well, let's say anyone can produce flight, no matter of who's doing it.
That's
If
incorrect. I cannot
the
fly.
point I'm trying to make, what's up?
I cannot fly.
No,
Okay, so
no, but you guys are completely missing my
No,
point.
here's the thing. So
Anyone
you
can
just-
produce
sure.
the mechanics of physics of flight
no.
if they produce the same variables.
Okay,
The
so
issue here is that two
Hey,
different
Fasad.
people are coming to a different conclusion because there's something called free will.
no. Hold on, listen. I didn't say we come to the same different conclusions. We have the same conclusion. We are thinking of the same thing, but yet our brain signatures look different. That's what I was saying. So
Why would
trying
it look different if it's physics?
because we're different people. We have different biologies. He
So
has a
physics.
different
So
brain
it doesn't matter if you're flying a Boeing 747 or if you're flying a kite. The physics is the same.
That's
I'm just trying to
incorrect.
understructure.
That is
I'm
fundamentally
lost on
incorrect.
The
Yeah.
substructure.
No. There is
The
no
substructure will
substructure.
remain
There
the
is no
same.
substructure here.
Yeah, it's called.
Kites don't actually fly.
What are you guys talking about?
A Boeing 747 and the physics that are required to fly it are nowhere akin to that of flying a kite.
It's the same equation.
No, it's not.
It has to do with the amount.
Do you realize one is a,
has to do with the amount of-
jet fuel powered
Okay.
machine and the other is a
Yeah,
piece of
and it has to
paper
do
on
with-
a string?
Yeah,
Okay, well, let's
You're
use-
aware
let's
there's
use
different
Cessna.
physics and
Let's use
mathematical
Cessna.
equations
Hey, guys,
that
guys,
are
Let's
required
use
to
Cessna.
fly these
It's the
things.
same. It's the same equation. It's
Hey,
the same
no, they're
equation.
not.
Whether you're you're crazy.
They're fundamentally
crazy.
different things.
They are not.
They are
A
fundamentally
freaking
different.
Hey, Morpheus,
someone
do you
can give
realize-
you an equation and
Okay.
calculate based off the weight and the
Morpheus.
speed
You're wrong.
on how if it's
Okay.
going to produce
You-
flight or not.
You're
Morpheus,
you're
wrong.
wrong.
Morpheus.
You're
So,
wrong.
hold on. Do you realize
A
do you
Cessna
realize-
and a Boeing
hold on,
747 both require the same
stop.
physics to
No,
fly.
no,
Hey, Morpheus,
How is this
hold on.
even a topic of
Stop.
discussion?
Hold on.
I'm gonna let
This
you
is
talk
insane.
because you're
Listen.
clearly wrong here. You're so wrong. This is like
This time-
hilarious.
It's not.
I want to break this down. I want to break this down. Hold on.
Two
Because-
planes, both
No,
use the same.
No, you started with a
Fundamental-
plane and a kite. Pause. Stop.
Yes.
Like, dude.
Yeah.
Let's break this
You think
down.
a plane's
So-
going to fly with no speed? No.
Okay.
No,
There
no
needs to
one
be a
said
certain amount of
anything.
flight.
No one said anything about that. You said
You
the
guys are both wrong on
calculations
this
were the
subject.
same. They are
No,
incorrect.
the
That is
equations. It's an
incorrect. The
equation.
equations are
equation.
different.
I'm
They're
trying
not.
to. I'm trying to
The
explain something. Hold
equations
on.
are completely different.
Hey. All right. So okay. So
What about a Cessna and a Boeing
hold on.
747?
Let's
Are those
stop.
equations
Bro,
different?
We can get to that in a minute. I'm gonna let him talk because I've been
Right.
talking. But I'm telling you, they're completely different things.
They're not. There's a fundamental principle behind it.
Please. Can I get a word in? All right.
Okay.
So
All right,
you
you're
talked
good.
about conceptual frameworks, right? So me and Fasad can envision the identical conceptual framework, right? But when Fasad thinks of it, his brain is doing one thing to give a picture in his mind, and when I think of it, my brain does something different to give me the picture of that conceptual framework. So our brain states look very different.
I would disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah, because here's the
Oh,
thing.
he
what's
also thinks that a
different?
Boeing and a kite fly the same way. So
Wait a
I
minute.
mean,
No,
I'm not really
it's a
surprised at this point.
It's the fundamental. It's the fundamental physics of flight, guys. It's the same. It's the same. No
Yeah,
matter
let me
what-
ask
what
you something.
size.
Let me pause you
so-
real quick. Let me
But hold
pause
on
you
real
real quick.
quick. Let me
let me
correct
ask
what
you a
you just
question.
said.
Let me ask
No,
you a
this is
question.
important.
If you
This is
answer my
important.
question, I will
This
let
is
you talk the
important.
rest of the podcast.
Okay, go.
Okay? Does a jet engine calculation have to do with free flight like a kite or a balloon.
It's not. I didn't say free flight. I said
A
flight.
kite was your exact usage
that's
of
flight.
two things flying in the same method.
Okay, and so
So a kite
Let me just break this down here.
And a
Let me
Boeing
just break this down.
747
Yes,
have
yes,
the
so let me-
same physical calculations
This is crazy.
and use the
guys.
same
You guys-
formula
you're
to determine
misunderstanding.
flight.
Let
No,
me-
no.
let me-
Because one is
I'm going to break
self-propelled
this down for
and
you.
one
If I
is
can't
based
talk,
off of
then it doesn't matter.
Airstream. So I'm
let me
asking you, are they the
explain.
same thing?
Okay, let me explain what I'm talking about here.
Okay.
And any mathematician or someone who deals with physics would 100% agree with what I'm saying. I think
No,
there's
they
a
won't, because
misunderstanding.
one's going to tell. One's
part
going
of
to
my
tell you that
Let me explain.
let
It-
me
guys,
let
I
me
haven't
tell
even
you,
explained it.
one using its own force versus one being pushed by the wind are
Guys.
two different things, buddy.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Let me
if you
let
don't
me
know
break
that
this
basic
down for
math,
you.
then you're really off the chart.
No, you guys are. This is insane to me. This is really insane to me. Okay, let me just break
Have you
down
ever
some of the
looked at
common
just, like,
features here.
Basic math
Let-
on like flight.
No, so let me break this down. Holy
Okay.
shit, this is
I mean,
craziness to me.
you can try, but this is insane, bro.
It's not. I'm not going to try. I'm not. Or I'm not going to.
Yeah, he didn't answer
I'm
my
not-
question. I saw that. It's fine. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I
talk.
I'm about to answer the question here.
Okay. I bet
Okay.
money. I'll bet you my next paycheck is a story that doesn't answer the question.
I'm just going to give you the facts here.
I really like to bring this back to free will.
No, let me answer the question because this is ridiculous. You guys have accused me of not understanding that there's a basic equation to the balance between the weight and the airspeed and the thrust in order to gain flight. It doesn't matter if it's a kite or an airplane. Hear me out. There's a million different airplanes. There's a million different weights.
Okay.
And guess what? It
So-
requires a certain amount of weight, a certain amount of thrust and speed of the aircraft. I don't know the exact equation, but it's around 131 knots or something before an aircraft can take flight.
Hey, so
And those
let's-
are proportional to each other,
let's bring
regardless
it back.
of the
Let's
weight.
bring it back to free will.
It's
Let's bring it
not-
back to
it's not
free
Of
will.
course-
it's not
of course a
proportional.
kite-
Okay, so let's
A
bring it.
kite's not going to fly without
Hey,
propulsion.
all right.
It requires
Guys,
wind.
let's bring it back to free will.
The ground speed versus airspeed isn't proportional. B, you clearly don't know what you're talking about here. C, the airplanes have their own force, which is why when they push air, they push it over
There's
a
a
wing versus under a wing, which
There's
causes
an equation.
a
Hey,
negative
guys,
balance.
there's an
versus-
equation.
Guys,
But
let's
No,
that has
no.
nothing to
Free
do
will.
with free will.
There's an
but I just
equation
wanted
in
to point it
physics.
out.
Okay,
That-
but for Morpheus. Okay,
No,
right.
there's an equation in
Let-
physics.
Sure.
There's an
okay.
equation in
I
physics.
just
where
wanted
if
to
you plug
point this
in-
out. You're just
No,
wrong.
guys, I'm not gonna back off this. There's an equation in physics, and if you plug in the variables, you're gonna get the same outcome. It doesn't matter what you're flying. That's basic
Well,
science.
since kites
There's an
don't have
equation
their
in
self,
physics.
listen real quick.
How do kites fly?
Flights don't
What's the
have
propulsion system?
self-proportion. It's
What's the
wind,
propulsion system? for
wind
kites?
and you running.
Exactly,
Hey,
wind.
guys,
Wind
That's
and
the-
you
that's the-
running.
let's bring
That's
it. Let's bring it. Let's.
That's not
wind.
self-propulsion.
That's your answer.
Are you
Hey,
aware
It
that's
doesn't
not
matter. I didn't
self-propulsion?
say self-propulsion. I didn't say
Okay,
that.
so
You
there's a
said that.
different equation for a self-prepared
Nope,
aircraft.
It's
Yeah.
still propulsion.
Oh, okay,
Guys.
so a hot
It
air
still
balloon
requires
and
speed based off of the weight.
Okay, you're
Guys,
so
please.
far off the chart here that you're
No, I'm
ridiculous.
not.
You're
I'm
ridiculous.
100% not.
All right,
I'll bring my friend on
I'm a
who's a-
link.
who's-
That's
who
great.
has a
I hope
degree
he's a
in mechanical
NASA
engineering.
aircraft
Hey.
engineer, bro. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
this is just
he'll tell you.
insane. But
You
more
can plug in the
importantly,
variables on any computer.
okay, that's
All
fine.
right,
Let's
sure,
assume
sure.
that's
Okay.
gospel. I don't care. I don't care.
go back-
What does that have to do with
I'm
free
not going
will?
to sit here and
Can we
be
go back to
insulted
free
on basic science.
I'm gonna just
I'm
send
not
you a link when we're
insulted.
done, bro. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
All right. Okay.
It's not 100%. I'm saying that there's an equation. If you,
Bruh, I don't
calculate all the
care. I
variables.
do not care.
You do
I
care,
do
'cause
not.
You just said I was wrong.
Yes, you're still wrong. I will gladly send you some information on how flight works. I want to talk about free will.
Well,
That's what I
that's
want.
kind of important.
How the hell does flight and free will have anything to do with each other in this exact moment?
Because one has agency and one doesn't. This is basic philosophy.
Agency has nothing
Agency
to do
has
with
nothing to
It
do with
doesn't,
free will.
even though the
No, it does not.
Encyclopedia of Stanford,
totally irrelevant.
even
Totally
though the
irrelevant.
Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says it does. Interesting. You guys are crazy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I just looked up the definition before the podcast. I'm not
Cool,
stupid. I'm going to come on
cool.
here with basic
Okay.
facts.
Okay.
So the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy talks about determinism, necessitarianism,
Facade,
free will,
okay, facade. I don't
compatibilism.
facade. Hey, listen. All right, so let's
Yeah,
we have an
yeah,
agent.
You're where I
and let's
wasn't
say
talking, right?
let's say everything the agent does has already been determined. Is that determinism?
Determinism means that
Oh
the-
no. And there's an agent, and everything the agent does has been determined for whatever it means. There's a God that just dictated everything that agent is going to do. Is that determinism? The answer is yes. So therefore, agency has nothing to do with it. It's totally irrelevant to the argument. You can have agents. That doesn't mean there's free will.
So
Free will requires agency. Determinism does not care. It is completely irrelevant to
what I'm
so
okay.
you
So
have,
that's your. So you're saying, you're asserting, or you're proposing that that's the way we exist. It's through is a deterministic.
So this
way.
is what I was going to talk about, like causality. So like causality is a thing. Like to deny it would just be crazy. That's how we do science.
That's science, but objects in matter don't have agency or potential or the ability to choose things. That's the problem with
we're objects matter, and we choose things all the time.
Yeah, in those
like but so you chose to come on this podcast.
But
yeah,
also
of course,
cause and effect.
Yeah, but the difference here is that
that's really easy.
The difference here is that we have, in Spinoza's terms, we would have potential, which is multiple different choices.
So all things have potential.
So this is why I wanted to break down my argument.
That's not true. All things don't have potential.
Sure.
There's
Can
one,
you name something
there's
that
one,
doesn't have potential?
Yes. So here's the thing. In physics, or let's just say in the material sciences, if you perform the correct chemistry, there's only one outcome.
Okay.
So
what you're saying is it only has the potential to do one thing, but it still has potential.
No, potential means more than one thing. That's the difference.
No, it doesn't.
Determinism is one outcome.
Why does potential mean it has to be more than one thing?
Hold on.
How is it potential if there's only one outcome?
Okay,
it is potential. So hold on. Listen, you have two hydrogen atoms, right? And you put them together. What is the only possibility? Helium. Helium's the only possibility. You can't get lithium or oxygen or carbon, anything else.
Yeah, that's different in value. So
no. There's only one potential outcome. It's still potential.
Only potential
that's not
for
what
those two hydrogen atoms.
Yes, it is.
It is. That is the definition of potential.
It's not potential. You guys are crazy, man. I've watched whole lectures
you clearly have either a poor understanding of it or a very, very specific view that no one else uses.
Having or showing the capacity to become or develop into something in the future. So with two hydrogen atoms,
here's the issue.
You have one potential.
Okay, so can I give it an argument for? Can we discuss a counter argument to that?
Go ahead.
So the definition
the whole purpose of the show is
to the definition of potential. You want to argue with the definition of potential?
This is a philosophical.
I'm just making sure that's where you're going.
So I can argue against anything.
You sure can, but I'm just asking. That's what you're trying to do.
So if you want to actually have an open mind and listen, then you can. If you don't, then you could just live with the definition and move on.
Okay, go.
So, hear me out here.
Okay, I just wanted to break down my argument.
We're talking about this area of conversation we're talking about here. Okay, this is what's so funny to me. You want to point at words when we're talking.
No, you're gonna make your argument. Hey,
I have to make the argument.
Yeah, go ahead, make the argument. But you got to make it medical.
I'm making it.
You're commenting.
I can't even finish my thought because you've interrupted me at this point.
No, but you're about to comment on something that we here did. I just want you to make your argument because I have an argument I want to make as well.
Yeah, my argument is simple. When you're talking about free will and determinism, if there's only one outcome, then you see the issue here, right? Free will has to have multiple outcomes. There has to be agency and the ability to have value and choice. There's no choice in a deterministic outcome. That's my point. And that's also in the Spinozan literature where potential is multiple choices. And so regardless of your definition,
you've defined the difference in determinism and free will.
Yes. So what you basically said that's agencies
laid out every definition when I started.
Hey, Morphe. So what you had basically said was that agency is required for free will. It's a prerequisite. And we agree. Where me and Fasad started disagreeing with you on earlier, because you had said that if there's determinism, then you can't have agency. Determinism does not care about agency. The agents can be determined. Or if there's no agents, there's still determinism. That's where it broke down. Also, when we talked about
if it's determined, then there's no potential for choice or value.
It doesn't matter if
it doesn't matter if people have value.
No, that's not what I said. We're talking about agents. You said agency.
Yes,
That
which
you-
means
pretty
that
much-
it's not determined.
No, that's
why I'm
not what that
confused.
means.
That's-
That is not what that
that's
means.
literally
Oh,
You're
really?
confused because yes, you can have an agent.
That's the
who is-
fundamental crisis of determinism. Is
you have an
free
agent.
will, which
There's
happens
an
to be
agent.
agency.
So that's wrong. You can have an agent that's determined. So just every reformed Christian.
This is your opinion.
No. It's not my opinion. Every reformed Christian on the planet will disagree with you. Go ask a Calvinist. We all have souls. We're all agents. God is controlling all of that. So it is not free will. It is determined. Yet we're all agents. So there's like billions of people. There's a guy in the chat, M, who's in the chat. He's a reformed Christian. He will disagree with you on this. He believes in agency, as stated in the Bible, but there's also determinism. It is God that's sovereign over all of this. So this
You're a theist now?
no. What I'm saying is this
Well,
thing.
how do we get in the conversation of theology?
What I'm saying, you're saying like we have.
'Cause I can bring up Spinoza
No,
as
hold
God
on, stop.
and
You're
explain
saying
how
that
he understands
Okay,
it.
Morpheus, hold on. You're saying that we have some sort of fringe view because we can have agency and determinism, and that's just total nonsense. There's a pile of people that acknowledge agency and still thinks things are determined. I've never
I'm really
heard of this
curious
in my
why-
life.
So help me
your
out with this,
definition
because
of agency, and then B, why you think it's necessary.
Necessary.
Well,
So
yeah,
I
like,
thought
why
we
you think
agreed on the
determinism
terms in the
has-
very beginning of the conversation, and I laid out
I
basically
agree
the
on
three
yeah,
different.
your term didn't include determinism can't have agency.
No, I said that compatibilism was determinism with agency, which happens to be free will,
Yeah, so that
and that's just from the Stanford
that may be the case. That
Encyclopedia of
does not.
Philosophy.
So compatibilism has agency. That doesn't mean determinism can't have agency.
No, compatibilism is the convergence of both free will and determinism. In order to have free will, the person has to have agency and choice in order to determine or qualify value.
Okay, Morpheus. Okay,
So you guys are
Morpheus.
really
No.
confusing me
I don't know. You're confused here. Okay, so
I'm confused, okay.
yes. Okay, if
Well,
you're
it's two
saying,
against one, so it's
Yeah.
probably my fault.
if you're saying that a prerequisite of free will is agency,
Yes.
okay, I agree with you. Facade agrees with you. However, you don't stop there. You keep on going to saying that if everything's determined, you can't have agency, as if the existence of agency debunks determinism. That is categorically false.
That's the mainstream argument.
No,
So-
it is not. I've never heard.
So here's the issue with determinism.
Bro,
If you have determinism, then how do you have values? How do you derive value?
Okay, so no. Hold on. So you're gonna have to say that all those the big philosophers that believed in determinism, you're gonna have to say that they didn't believe in agency, as if like they didn't exist. They didn't believe that anybody around them existed. Just weren't agents. Of course,
Like
there
I
are.
said in the beginning, if you roll the tape back, if your definition of determinism is just an antecedent that is the calculation that derives that is necessary to derive the proper outcome,
Mhm.
then I'm right there with you. But my understanding of this is different than that.
Okay, so
it's
do you-
not merely an antecedent or calculation. Like at least in my view of determinism, it's especially causal determinism. It is a set of events prior to the ones that currently exist that led to the ones that exist now.
Yeah, in that sense, this is why I said it's a catch-22. Also, if you rewind the tape to the very beginning, look up the
I remember you
definition of
saying
catch-22.
I know the definition well. I know it came from
Yeah.
Joseph Keller's book,
Yeah.
Catch-22.
Yep.
I don't
I
see
said it in the
how
very
your
beginning.
argument isn't
But-
a Catch-22,
Well,
but
because it depends on how you define it, number one. And if you're just going to say it's the person who made the decision and their calculus, and that's all determinism is, then no one's going to disagree with you there.
no.
Yeah,
So
lots
like,
of people disagree with that.
yeah. I mean, like, A, that's not what we're saying, but B, people disagree.
Well,
with
what
that.
are you saying then?
I'm
Help me
saying
out.
there's an essentially nigh infinite number of pre-causal events that led to the set of circumstances as they are, and it's because of those causes that affect things as they are, which it's a domino effect. That's it. It's cause and effect.
Let's okay. Well,
Really
let's-
easy. So
This
does
is easy
is causa-
subject. Okay. Fun.
as
It's,
far
it's
as
just
Um,
causality.
it's
so-
just causality.
An outcome was determined by the previous state of affairs.
If that's all this is, then I don't see why there's any controversy. I think that there's
Well,
controversy
because you
that's
think
because-
there's free will.
well, no, because I just looked at the Stanford Encyclopedia definitions and I came to the conclusion that there's three competing theories, really. I mean, if you want me to lay out the terms again,
I
I
mean,
will.
technically, there's a sub theory of both of those, but yeah, I mean, technically,
Sure,
right,
I'm
there's
just saying
three
in
with
the
a sub-theory of one.
mainstream.
But I mean, I can
thoughts.
also say that like there's two primary theories on a deity, but that's not really relevant to what's true.
Well, no, I'm not saying that's what's relevant to true. I'm just saying we have to take
Okay,
into
so
consideration all
given
three.
we're talking determinism
point-
versus free will, what is the best case you could possibly make for free will? Like, let's say, what is the
Values.
evidence? So,
Literally
values.
values.
And by
Values, go ahead.
values, what do
How
you
do you
mean?
know? How do you know if something is considered good or bad in terms of values? if
I
it's
don't
just
see how that's
well-being.
relevant to free will.
Me either. So the well-being.
So if I own a slave, for instance,
Mhm.
right?
How is
and
that
it's
relevant to free
determined-
will?
that it would
Like,
be
haven't
wrong.
even said 2 words, and you guys are all like jumping on me.
No, I'm saying that would be wrong if you own.
I
a
mean,
slave,
imagine if I had like 3 people on my side jumping in
Hey,
every 5
you're
You're
seconds.
kind of
I
lucky
was-
you get
I
a
was
break.
saying,
'Cause
if
I
you
ain't
own
gonna
a
let you go
slave-
sometimes.
Murphy, I was saying if you own a slave, I agree with that would be wrong. I was my bad for jumping.
The question is a little bit deeper than that, right? Because if it's determined and there's no actual choice involved, then how can you derive an actual value? Value
Cool.
has to do with choice.
Cool.
And
Can I
if
ask
you're
you a question?
if it's just deterministic, and you're just going to make the the choice regardless because it's determined by a precedent whatever mechanism, then you've basically robbed the word value from its actual meaning.
Well, I mean, I
No,
disagree
alright,
with the
so
fact
can
that
I-
value has something to do
Can I
with
answer your
choice.
question? So, can I ask you a question? So when the way you measure value, right? We're measuring it with well-being. We're saying, is it good?
You are.
Huh?
Well, in
You're
this scenario
measuring
that
it.
he's about
Don't
to
speak
present,
for
yes.
everyone.
So okay, here's the thing. So you ask how I determine it, right? So this is how I determine it. Well-being is like your ruler. You're measuring this. Does this add up to well-being? If it does not, then it is wrong. Well-being.
Is Hitler wrong? What about his well-being? Because guess what? His well-being was getting
what-
rid of millions of Jews. And without
Okay,
intentionality,
okay, well,
or
hold on.
teleology, then
Well,
you're screwed.
what does that? What does that have to do with free
Everything,
will?
every single thing.
Okay,
what you're
hold
trying
on,
to do is you're trying to boil.
Hold on.
You're trying to boil ethics down to simply mechanical causality, like in physics, and that's not how human beings work.
Look,
Human beings are extremely irrational, which is why it's
Bruh.
important when they have
Bruh.
values.
I need you to stay on topic. Hold on. So you objected to determinism by saying, how do we determine values? And I told you how I determine values, right? I was not trying to describe an ethical system to you. I was showing you how I can determine values. Free will does not
Oh, you
come in
do.
part of. So no. If someone whacks facade in their head with a brick, I will say that is not a good thing because that wasn't good for him. Whether or not free will exists is totally irrelevant. We're looking at the act and the consequences of the act. And was it good for his well-being? No. So
It's determined. There's no good
So
or
what?
bad. The person who just
so
had a
what?
priest.
who
had a
that's
predecessor
not
to-
sequitur.
That's
How-
not relevant
not.
to the outcome.
How do you derive value
Wait a
from
minute. So-
purely
wait a minute. So,
mechanical
okay, wait a minute.
sequences?
So no,
How do you
hold on.
derive value from purely mechanical
No,
sequences?
hold on. So I
Won't
murdered
get an
somebody.
answer because that's the main issue here.
Okay.
How do you derive value from
I
purely
already
mechanical
I
sequences?
answered your question. So
What is it?
So
Because people listening, that's the central question here.
I answered your question. So for value, we measure it to well-being.
That's just your definition.
Okay.
It's not a
You
universal.
asked. You
That's
asked.
not
That's
an
that's why I
action.
do it.
You
You asked for how
his
I do it.
definition.
Yeah.
No.
So I can't.
I'm saying
I can't-
we
I can't
like
tell-
everyone on Earth.
I mean,
We mean-
you don't
human
have to use
beings.
the same
There-
definition. You asked for one.
Yeah. I can't give you. Did we free?
What determinism is. You have a competing definition of what free will is. It seems that we can't have an agreement on a definition. So how about we use one and tell you what that is, and then you can point out the flaws in it if you can.
So everyone is able to derive their own ethic, regardless of the fact that the the prior action is going to determine the outcome anyway. So they have no agency in this situation.
What
It's
do you
just
mean they have
completely
no agency?
mechanical. It's a mechanical causal chain.
I would say it's a causal chain, but what does mechanical have to do with it? 'Cause
It means it's blind. There's no agency. Just like if I shoot a bullet in a specific trajectory, there's an equation that will tell me if I'm going to hit target based off of all of the different elements of physics.
okay.
It's just blind mechanical causality. There's no way to derive an ethic or value from that. That's the issue I have with determinism
if you point
in
that
general.
gun at someone's face and you blow their head off, and I can say my values are based on well-being, and blowing someone's head off is not good for their well-being, how am I not able
It has
to
nothing to do with their well-being. It's your well-being. You have to understand the agency piece. That's what you're missing. What's your well-being?
In what way?
It may be
what am
in
I
your
missing
well-being.
here?
It may be your well-being that you blow their head off, and that's great. That's what
Why?
Hitler did.
Morpheus. So
Why? Because they're trying to. Well, in Hitler's case,
so
it was
like,
about
when we say
nationalism.
well-being, we're not talking about just my own well-being. We're talking about
Oh,
well-being.
so it's
as a
more than your
concept.
well-being.
yeah,
Well,
it's the
as a
well-being of
concept.
every
Oh, wow.
conscious creature.
Every conscious creature. So you're
Yes.
taking into calculation every conscious creature's well-being when you make decisions.
As many. I'm calculating as many as I can.
So what if your conscious creatures that you care about happen to be white Germans?
I mean,
See, here's the issue with your.
I
You
know
care
German
about.
people
point.
You
that are
care
white.
about.
That
I,
doesn't-
Here's
I
the issue
care
with
about.
both of your points.
No,
I
no,
care about
I
I
care
care
about.
about white Germans too, though.
I care about white Germans. I care about Jewish people.
If you're Hitler, then killing Jews and getting them out of your country is in your well-being.
Morpheus.
So what's wrong with that?
Hey, I can
Morpheus.
fundamentally point out why it's wrong, but like.
Oh, in your opinion.
No,
but
no,
guess
no.
what? There's
I
no
can
God,
point
so
out to
doesn't
why
matter.
it was bad for Hitler's well-being as well as for the well-being of the nations, the other
What
people
if he
that
was
were
successful?
involved. I mean,
What if he was
as
successful?
we saw the
Many
direction it was
nations have
going,
been successful with genocide.
Hey,
and
Many nations have been
congratulations, that's
successful with
not
genocide.
relevant to well-being.
Oh, it's
And-
100% relevant.
God,
That's
no,
No, it's
literally
not.
the issue.
Success
here.
has
Hold
nothing to
on.
do with well-being, bro. Like
Hold-
you're
It
really,
has to do with
off the
your
mark
definition.
today. I don't know what's up with you, bro.
Morpheus. Hold on. So, okay, well, I don't see how this has anything to do with free will.
Because in order to derive value from choices, if you're just like I said, if you're just going to say that this is a conversation centrally about determinism and free will. Okay, determinism in the definitions I've read is in direct opposition to free will. Free will means that you have the ability to weigh the specific choices you're going to weigh based off of whatever criteria you have and make a decision. And so, I mean, to me, that's my basic understanding. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
All right, so Morpheus, hey, so here's the thing. Like, I'm confused by your objection because we've been on this turnaround ethics, and I don't see how it's relevant. So for instance, all right. So like, if someone whacks Facade in the head with a brick, I say that is wrong because it wasn't good for Facade. You realize free will didn't come into the equation at all. I looked at the consequences of the act and then made the judgment call on the act. Free will is totally irrelevant.
So that's just one perspective you gave. Like, what if Facade happened to be the guy? Let me explain.
All right.
I mean, what if Facade happened to be the guy in the neighborhood?
Hitler?
There you go. There's a good example. Or what if Facade was someone who was...
That doesn't
what
bring free will into
what
the
does that have to
question.
do with free will?
Because
You're
it has to
talking
do
about
with your
ethics
choices.
versus free will.
So free will means you have the ability to make choice, which is how we derive value in ethics. If you can't have, if there's no, if there's no ability to choose,
problem with your understanding of value, because you
if
said
there's no ability to
you
choose,
said
then there's no
specific-
value. That's
You're,
what a
you're
value
wrong.
is.
You're wrong.
A value is
No,
a
it's
choice.
not.
You're
No,
wrong.
It's not.
A
You don't
value
think
is
values are
something that has
choices?
usefulness.
You know
okay,
what's funny?
You ready?
Look at my
Does
picture
gold
right
have a
now.
does
Look at my
gold have any
picture.
value?
That's Carl Jung. Literally,
great.
that's what it says.
I don't care. I don't care.
What does it say?
I don't know.
Your
because
values are your choices, not
I
what
don't.
you say.
I don't know because it's cut off. But I'm asking you a question. Does gold have value?
That's a simple.
It's cut off. I can't read it. I can't help you. Does
I'll
gold
help
have?
you. It says that.
Can you answer my question? Does gold have
has
value? There was
We're
no
not
choice
talking about that kind of
involved.
value. We're talking
What-
about choices.
No. There was
Values
no
are
choice
choices to
involved.
me.
You said value
And so were
required
they to Carl
choice.
Jung.
What choice was
Carl
made
Jung
to make
and
gold
myself,
valuable?
Both.
Are you going to
That has
answer the
nothing to do with
question, bro?
values.
I asked, does gold
We're
have
talking about two
value? You
different-
said yes.
Literally two different. We're talking
Does
about
gold
two
have
completely
value?
Different.
Answer the question.
Those are two different definitions.
Okay,
Of course
so
it
give
does.
me
It
the
has economic value.
definition
It doesn't have
in
moral
which
value.
I'm using that gold has value,
So what's
and
the
your
con-
definition in which gold does not have value.
No, value from an ethical standpoint has to do with your choices. You value it and you
Again,
choose it.
there is no definition that
So you
requires
can't say
choice.
Hey guys,
economic value is different than moral value.
I think I figured out the hung up. He's a Morpheus.
Economic value is different than
hold
moral
on.
value. That's not a question that.
Hey, more Morpheus. Okay, so and let's say in a world where everything's determined, do people have choices? Can people
No.
make choices? Okay, so in my world, if determinism, people make choices. So determinism doesn't mean you don't have a choice.
Then okay, so that's different than the definitions I laid out from the beginning.
Okay, so no. So here's the thing. So your choice, like when you
choose is what you value. Is how I understand it.
Well, not exactly. So the choice you made is your brain reacting to stimuli. You following?
Not necessarily. There's plenty of people who have brains that act as stimuli. They make completely opposite choices than you would think they would make.
But their brain's still reacting to a stimuli.
It's still reacting to stimuli.
And
So yeah, but how do you determine whether or not the outcome or the decision they're making is in any way determined either by the outcome or by whether they value the outcome? That's another problem.
So if they value the outcomes, their values, all of that, like that can be.
But if they were determined, wouldn't you think the outcome would be the one that they would value? Because there's a lot of people who make choices that are determined and they don't value them.
So, totally irrelevant.
Like, so that is not irrelevant. That's literally the problem. That's one of many problems.
So you think because people make choices that they value, there's free will? Why do you think people have values of choices that they make?
So what I'm saying is
stop. Answer the question. You just drew yourself in a box. I'm really curious to see how you get out of it.
So what's your question exactly?
So you said that people often make choices that reflects their values. How
Correct.
do you think people got those values?
Some of those values happen to be biological drives.
Did they choose
some of those values happen to be yes.
So they chose
the biological
drive. You chose the biological drive. You chose where you were born, when you were born, to who you were born.
So I'll give you examples
you were born in.
Yeah, you're just giving examples that what I would consider still be valuable, but what I would say is like, if I choose deontology versus consequentialism, that's a choice, and the outcome's going to be different in both ways.
Why did you make that choice?
Because I value one of the systems over the other one.
And why do you think you value that?
It's just my preference for that specific thing.
Okay,
it depends on the thing.
So would you say that because of like particular literature was specifically appealing, because you read more on a certain topic? Would you say because a professor made a particularly persuasive argument, or did it just happen on its own?
Well, I would say it's because I looked at all the different potential options and I chose the one based off of the free will I have that I value.
So you would say based off of a culmination of information that exists prior to you understanding it and receiving it, you made a choice.
Yes, and if that's your definition of determinism, then like I stated an hour ago,
none of those things existed, you couldn't have made that choice.
Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, for anyone who wishes to rewind it, if that's your definition of determinism, then I have no issues with it.
So I got a.
If you actually want to have a conversation about, because what's up?
My point is, you can't have free will and determinism, because free will essentially breaks causality. Okay, but you're a proponent of free will. So can you give me an example of something that happens strictly based on free will?
Yeah, the agent's ability to look at multiple different... In other words, to me, the differences between the two are one of mechanical physics, right? Causality and mechanical physics. You can think of throwing dice on a dice board, right? you could trace the steps back to all of the different trajectories and angles, and you can calculate the outcome in theory. Even that's difficult because if we could calculate the outcome of things through determinism, we would, we wouldn't have issues like the stock market or gambling or whatever. So, but when it comes to values and choices and free will, the difference between the two is that when I do a physical action in the world, there's a quantifiable and finite outcome based off of those variables in that physical action. The difference between that and an agent in the world, and I can quote people like Spinoza, for instance, they would say that the agent does not have to rely on the laws of physics. What they can do is they can look at multiple different variations of potential outcomes and make a decision because of what they want. And in most cases, humans are irrational.
So
It's not even a matter of
Morpheus.
yeah.
So okay, so like, all right. So I was
If
gonna
you want
say,
to calculate human decision to mechanics, then we're on the same page.
so all right.
I just
So
don't think it's
so being irrational has nothing to do with determinism, right? Because like it doesn't mean that you're always going to get the right answer. It just means that the outcome was determined by the prior state of affairs. So it was only one outcome. So nothing else could have happened, right? So it doesn't being rational,
again,
irrational, is totally irrelevant.
to me, this is a catch-22 semantical argument that's difficult to get out of. That's why I stated in the beginning,
Well-
because I agree with you, right? If you could trace every synapses in the brain and you could find out and trace, like the pathways, then, you could make an argument for a causal chain regardless. And even if you're just accounting
So
for
wait a minute. So are you saying because we can't account for all of those things, then there's free will? Because now it sounds like you're just injecting free will on our ignorance of causality.
The normative definition that your average person would understand is that determinism, and I guess you're, like I said, you're a
I mean, not to be rude, but you
compatibilist.
haven't used the normative definition yet. You've used the Stanford Encyclopedia
No, I'm
of
saying
Psychology to define to define free will and determinism, and in the cases in which we just described, that would fit both very strict definitions of them.
No, absolutely not. Actually, it's the compatibilist is what he would be, not a determinist, because you can't have free will and determinism in the same vein. So he would be the compatibilist by the philosophical definition. But from a normative perspective,
no, hold up.
Because a compatibilist is someone who believes in determinism and free will.
But he doesn't believe in free will. He said that from the beginning.
So he's a strict determinist.
I think that was pretty clear.
So he's a strict determinist then.
I agree. Are you just getting to that conclusion now, or are you just repeating it for the sake of argument, or what's going on?
Well, no, I'm confirming. I mean, we've been going back and forth on.
Are y'all talking about me?
Yes, you. You said at the beginning you're a determinist, right? You're
not I'm a determinist. Yeah,
hard determinism, not soft determinism, aka compatibilism.
Even if you look at compatibilism, it's just determinism. It's just the sensation that you have free will when
it's. I mean, what I've read is
compatibilism is illusory free will.
Yes, basically, yeah.
So free will is an illusion.
It's an illusion.
Determining factors.
Well, no, I'm saying that it opens up the opportunity for free will. It depends on when you.
It feels like you have free will, or it may.
That's
seem
not
that
the definition I just read earlier. I mean, I have it pulled up. I can read it verbatim. But either way, so basically, the central disconnect here is that I think that you can have because in my opinion, I think there are certain things that are deterministic, but I also think there's free will. If you boil it down to just a set of, like I said, a set of calculations at the beginning that are going to predict an outcome, which is somewhat, has a somewhat related to, this is a different topic, but how I understand truth anyway. If you were to boil it down to that, then I don't really see a counter argument. But to go back to my previous statement, which Fantastic Assad, you were trying to say, I haven't brought up a normative claim. You're right. But when I say normative, I would say like in general, like the average guy, girl, if you brought up determinism versus free will, what they're going to say is Determinism is just a kind of blind causal chain, whereas free will, the causal chain stops at an agent, and the agent gets to determine outside of physics. You could
So,
even call it
hey,
metaphysical, an
Morpheus, so
outcome.
why would you stop the causal chain at the agent?
Because because at the agent you stop the physical, like the physics of the
No.
transaction.
We're governed by physics.
Yeah, every
What's up?
agent is governed by physics.
Yes.
To a
The,
certain
the,
degree.
the protons
No,
inside
no,
of me
no,
are
no.
held together by the strong nuclear force.
Yeah, no,
The electrons
to a certain degree, like everything that exists according to
But the
physics.
outcome. So the thought might be governed by physics, but the outcome is different.
Why?
Why? Because you can have many different cognitive cognitions, right? You can have many different thoughts in
Yeah.
your brain, but the question is value. That's why I keep coming back to this, which is why I'm a little bit confused here. But
Okay. So hold on. How about this? Okay.
I'll
So
give you an example.
more phrase. No. I just want to stop here. All right. So you said like value is a choice
Correct.
to you. Okay. And you're saying things can't be determined because we have choices.
No, I'm saying that you can arrive at multiple different conclusions, and those conclusions might be physical.
What is this problem of value?
Physics.
What is the problem of value?
Because how do you know? We're talking about free will here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know what the outcome is going to be if you have multiple different choices?
It
will depend on
totally irrelevant. So here's the thing. So totally irrelevant. I don't have to know the
that's
outcome.
irrelevant too.
Well, it is because my epistemology of the outcome is totally irrelevant to the ontology of the state of affairs. I don't have to know the outcome. Things could still be determined. I could just be dumb or something. Like that this doesn't matter at all. What I'm trying to get to.
If you're saying that humans have rationale for their beliefs,
rationale's not part of it. Rationale's not part of it. So like rationale would be like a properly functioning brain, right? So whether the brain is functional properly or not,
I'll give you an example.
That would be determined as well. So what I'm asking is, but you keep bringing up the value thing. Tell me.
Yeah, because computers, for instance, that are strictly deterministic are going to come to the same conclusion regardless of the mathematical sequences within the computation. When it comes to a human, the difference between a human and a computer is that they're conscious and they can create their own choices and values that are detached
hold on.
the mechanics.
You should say value. No. You said to breed their own values and choices. Now it sounds like you're using value and choices two different things. Because otherwise, you just said choices and choices or values and values. Why did you use those?
The same thing.
Also, can I ask
basically
a really
your values
analogistic question, just in like for funsies? I swear it's directly related to this. But do you think if a perfect time machine existed, okay? Let's say you're in line to buy a shirt at a store, okay? And you are choosing between a red shirt and a blue shirt. And you go forward and you decide, I'm going to buy the red shirt. Do you think if a perfect self-correcting time machine existed, that we could put you in a time machine and put you back in line at the store before you bought the red shirt and the blue shirt, and you would then decide to choose the blue shirt? Do you think it's possible for you to make that choice?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Well, because again, it goes back to this is actually a famous demonstration by people who read Spinoza, right? To a certain degree, Spinoza's necessitarianism, like I said, is stricter than the determinism that we've been talking about here. Is to a certain degree, it depends on you can think of it as like an angle or a perspective of the way you're looking.
No. So this is perspective independent here. We want to know is something possible? Yes or no? He's asking you an ontological question. So perspective is totally irrelevant.
It's not in this demonstration that Spinoza made, which is a stricter determinist than determinists.
Okay, but
let me at least make it's really quick. It's really quick. Right. Basically, Spinoza says there's two ways you can look at this. If you look at it from the time machine back, all you see is strict necessitarianism or determinism. But if you look at it from the perspective of the agent, what you see is potential. And so it's always going to look as if it's deterministic from the after the choice is made. If you go back in time, though, there's still a potential for a different choice. That's just what I'm. That's just an
the
example.
point is, in a perfect time machine, you would go back and make the same choice again, and then you would get to the time machine, and they would send you back in time, and you would make the same choice again. And then you go forward through the checkout line with your red shirt. You get in the time machine to send you back in time to make the choice.
Yeah, but
which you'd always choose red.
but
Which
you're
would lead
you're
you to getting in the time machine to prove that
actually
you could choose otherwise.
actually one interesting example. I'll give it that to you. But actually, there's one thing that you're missing here is that when you go back in time, what have you created? We're all science fiction people here, I would imagine.
Okay, but that's why I said a perfect.
You've created a second.
Okay, but that's
you
why I
could
said a
s-
perfect
second
time
stream of
machine that
time.
can send you back in time.
But that's a contextual variable you have to account for.
Uh, uh,
So in a
but
second,
in
so
my
I would agree with you.
scenario, it's
Let me-
not something you have
Yes.
to worry about because I
Right.
said it is a time machine that is perfect in every way. And it can
It's,
send you back in time to when you're choosing the shirt.
so if you had
Okay, so
the
irrelevant
exact
of what another dimension or another alternate universe or whatever you want to call it
second
happens
timeline,
because of it.
basically, is what happens.
Sure,
Yeah,
irrelevant in the timeline in which you're
it's
buying.
not
the shirt.
irrelevant. Of course, if you're in the timeline where they bought the shirt, you're going to buy the same shirt.
Okay, so can you ever change
But that's not
timelines?
that's not a good. I wouldn't say that's a good
So
counter argument.
Morpheus, what's he
That's
asking
like if
you?
I say, that's like I'm
Morpheus,
saying,
Morpheus, what he's at, I was want to get some clarification. So he says you have a state of affairs, right?
if
And you
all
have
of the
a
factors are the same, you're going to come out with the
Morpheus.
same outcome. That's your answer. I know that's what you want. Trust
No,
me, I
well, that's
understand where
not,
you're
no.
going.
What I want is your answer.
Yeah, but I know what you want, and I agree with you.
Don't-
If every single
okay.
variable was the same, you're going to have the same outcome.
Okay, so
Okay,
that's what
so-
free will would be.
And that's,
It would be the
again,
ability to choose something.
go to
even
58 minutes ago,
even-
and I said
even
that if that was your
opposition.
definition, I agree. That's
So
just rewinding the tape. We can't seriously
so
be
again-
disagreeing about that.
Again, my question is, how are you an advocate of free will? It's just because. So, like my point here, if I can,
Because there has to be.
like my point being is that it doesn't matter whether you're making a choice or not. It doesn't matter whether you're an agent or not. It doesn't matter what you value. It matters that all the things that led up to this exact moment determined what choice you were going to make, what shirt you were going to buy, what values you held at the time were all determined when you made that decision.
You should have said
And-
that 59 minutes ago. We wouldn't discuss this for an hour. Because I agree with that. And I stated it at the beginning, which is funny.
Okay, so my question then is, why are you
If you
still
rewind
a
the tape, of
proponent
course, you're
free-
going to have the same.
So my question then is, why are you a proponent of free will if you agree that there is nothing you can do to change the circumstances leading to the next
Hilarious.
decision that you make?
So, because I'm claiming that
That
take
causality
per-
stops so you can make a decision?
no, I'm saying that that it's not strictly a causal outcome.
Can you give me an example in which something is not caused?
I mean, to a certain degree, we're getting a little bit semantic here.
No,
Because-
I'm not. You just
Oh,
said
this-
it wasn't,
this is
it
very
wasn't all
substantive,
causally. So I'm asking, can you give me any situation in which something was not caused?
You understand where he's getting at?
Yeah, I understand. I understand both of your points because I thought about this before you
alternatively,
got here.
irrelevant to an agent, can you give me any circumstance in which you could pause causality?
I'll restate my position here because, I mean, if you're talking about just the, if it's just the, like I said, the relationship between the human being's thoughts and the outcome of their thoughts, then I don't really have a disagreement here. If you're asking if human beings, or if the question is, do human beings have the ability to be somewhat metaphysical? In other words, they can, regardless of the, like, for instance, let me try to break this down. So if you're talking about synapses in the brain leading a human being to have to take a situation like someone's murder, for instance, or someone dying. If you're talking about the relationship of the synapses, having that thought and weighing all the specific variables to their basic moral framework and then coming to a decision, then if that's what you want to call it determinism, then that's fine. But like I said, my definition, based off of what I read before the podcast, was that determinism and free will are incompatible, similar to what was stated earlier. And so it like I said, catch 22. It becomes difficult because like if it's just you having a thought and making a decision, then there's no controversy in that. I think the main controversy in this whole discussion is whether or not you have the ability to intervene outside of the physical causal chain.
And do you believe
and
you have
Do
that
you?
ability?
um,
And if so, why?
I mean, at that point, like I said, I have a whole philosophy of truth
Just
based
give,
on
just give
the
us like
term.
a yes or no. Can you intervene in the causal chain? Like and then state your argument afterwards. That way we can.
It, it,
I'll tell you mine. No, like you are a part of the causal chain. That is my answer.
I would also
I-
agree, and I would say that literally everything that led to where you are will lead to what you will ultimately do. That is how I would define myself in a causal chain.
I have a tough time with that one because if it's just like again, if it's if because essentially what you're saying is that the outcome of an effect or a cause, let's just say effect, that's probably a good word. The outcome of an effect is always going to be the same. I have trouble with that. You know, I mean, when we're talking about causality, we're talking about
So
A hits B, hits C, hits D. But I feel like things are more complex and we have more agency, for lack of a better term,
Well, I don't disagree
control
in the
over it.
complexity. There's an infinite number of things that led to where we are. I mean, well, not infinite, but
Sure.
so close to infinite. You're right. Humans will never be good enough to calculate it. Humans will
So-
never be good enough to calculate things like the stock market or anything like
Right.
that. I don't think, at least in my lifetime. But
But
that
let
doesn't
me ask
mean
you
that
guys some
that's not
questions.
cause and effect. That just means that they're infinitely complex.
yes,
But-
that
but
means
let
there's
me-
so many links in the causal chain.
Then
Sure.
it's impossible to determine the origin or the
Yes.
future.
And so, and this is what I was talking about earlier. That is a epistemic problem. That doesn't change the ontology of determinism. Just because you don't know what the outcome is going to be, doesn't mean that the outcome isn't determined.
So in your view of this,
Mhm.
um, how do you affect an ethic or a value? Like, you don't think there's any such thing as like ethics or values?
Of course. Then this is what I was getting to. This is what I was so confused about, because this hasn't. I don't take into free will. Like I don't account for free will at all. Like it's totally irrelevant. So like again, if someone lobs facade in their head with a brick, I'll say it's wrong. Why? Because being lobbed in the head isn't good for facade. So you notice I didn't talk about free will with this at all. Like listen to my talk with Nico Davis. Like I didn't describe free will. Like it was totally irrelevant. I was looking at the
So
consequences of
so
an act,
basically, this
and
boils
then
down to a justification for your actions.
well, you look at. Well, I don't know about justification. You look at the
for justification for actions. Is that
Well,
what
I'm just
you're
saying.
after?
I'm
Is that where
saying.
the struggle is?
Well, I'm saying that in general, the understanding is that the ability to weigh and value your choices is parallel to free will, and the inability to, which is that the determination of your choices is predetermined.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
So having
No.
free will doesn't
Wow.
impact that or change it, and having determinism doesn't impact that or change it, because it doesn't matter what my stance is on free will. If I smash someone in the head with a brick, the outcome, their well-being, will decrease because they just got smashed in the head with a brick. So now, whether it was
Well, that's
determined
just
that I
yeah.
did that or whether I did that by free will, let's assume either or is possible. It doesn't change the outcome. So when we're
That's what
talking
we're
about something like rationale or justification or ramifications, if we put a starting point of well-being in front of it, then free will doesn't really come into play in any way, shape, or form. Because it doesn't matter whether it was determined that I smashed that person in the head or whether it was free will and I did it of my own desire and intent. The fact of the matter is I smashed somebody in the head, and that's a negative outcome on that person because it negatively impacts their well-being. So it doesn't matter whether I did it as a free agent or whether I did it because everything that led up until these circumstances determined I would do so. The fact
guess the
of the
best-
matter is
I
that
guess
person's
the-
now worse off.
I guess the difference here, in my perspective, and you know, and I know this is, I understand you guys are very convinced on your views on this, and but I think the difference here is that if I push you and you hit someone else, right? That's different than if you go up to a person and you hit them yourself. Because in one case, and this is also something that's very, very evident in the legal system. There's a difference between manslaughter and murder. There's a difference. There's differences between murders, and the reason why is because the legal system takes into account whether or not it was your free will or if it was
No, it does not.
an accident. Yes, it
No,
does.
it's not.
Have you ever heard of manslaughter?
Yeah, but that takes intent into
It's
Yeah,
intent.
exactly.
It is not
It's
about
We're
not
talking
free
about
will.
an agent. We're
It
talking
is
about
intent.
agent.
It is
We're talking
intent.
about an agent.
No. Hold
talking
on.
about an
No,
agent.
hold on. Hey, Facade. So, no, I'm sorry, Facade. Morpheus. So when we
Every
look,
time I
Morpheus. Hold on. I want to break this down. So,
okay.
when we talk
Alright.
about law, right? There's two things we looked at: Latin words, right? Mens rea, which is the guilty mind, and actus rea, which is the act, right? Those are only things they consider.
I'm
right?
just giving you two laws.
No, hold on.
Examples.
Stop. The guilty mind and the act, whether or not there was free will associated with that, is a philosophical issue that the law does not care about.
But we make a distinction between the two. Is my point. When like for
we
instance,
make a distinction for intent.
let me explain something. If I was to push Fantastic Facade and he hit you and you died, that's different than if Fantastic Facade had premeditated murder on his mind.
Yes, definitely.
And so in one case there was an outside force that caused the death. In the other case, it was the actual agent who caused the death.
The
without
difference
outside force.
is that if Facade had a guilty mind, right, then it would be murder, right? If he had
That's the difference between first, second, and third degree murder. The point I'm trying to make is that there is. I'm not. Look, I understand you guys. There's two of you on here, and you're very convinced. I could bring just as many people that
It's
are
not
just
about being
convinced of my point
convinced.
of view.
No,
You
but-
are.
no,
You're
no.
convinced of it.
It's not about being convinced. Like that's
If
a
you
solid
want to
argument.
define it, if you want to boil the
It's not-
argument
no,
down,
no.
It's
Because
nothing to do with my
Yeah.
convinced.
if
Yeah.
you want to boil the argument down to, for every action there's a precedent set of rationale and whatever causal mechanisms that took place, no one's going to disagree with you. How could you possibly disagree with that?
Morpheus.
Okay,
So your objections to ethics, did we not just shut that down? Did I just give you my ethical system and show you how it had nothing to do with free will? How I don't take into account at all?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so don't say like we're just convinced and there's just more of us.
Well, no.
You gave an argument. I shut it down. We have ethics, regardless of free will. And even if there was no ethical system without free will, it's just an appeal to consequences. That doesn't mean
free will.
So
Yeah.
again, if people understand free will to be the ability to have their own cognitive functions, which have an outcome of a specific choice, if that's your definition, then I don't see anyone arguing with that. I wouldn't have argued this conversation if that was all your definition of it
You
was.
said that they don't have their own cognitive function.
I'm saying that if free will
Uh-huh.
in most people's you know, if you ask a person what free will is, most people will say, "Oh, it's my ability to make a decision that will, you know, will have an outcome of some sort that is my preference based off my decision." In your
Gotcha. So
definition, you say, "Well, actually, that's determinism, because the outcome is just determined by your rationale." Those are almost tautological.
no, so
So,
check,
how
check,
do you
check.
define free will? Help me out with that then.
So given the state of affairs, the ability to do otherwise. So you so
That's
you so there's
that's
a
literally
state
the
of
potential argument I made earlier.
well but you were wrong because you're saying somehow potential
You
demands
said
two different
no.
choices
You said the
and two
ability to
different.
do otherwise, and in Spinoza, it wasn't even mine. It was
Yes, well,
Spinoza's.
that was my definition of free will. I disagree that that's true.
That you could have okay, and I understand that. I get that point, because if you did the calculations according to your own calculus, you know, you're going to come to the conclusion based off of, like, for instance, you know, like if you had a consequentialist view of ethics, and your value was that murder was bad, and someone did something and the outcome was murder, then that outcome is going to be determined by the framework that you use to explain it. Um, I get that, but I think that I mean, for most people listening, maybe not the super intellectual people, but I think that the central problem here, and what makes this an interesting topic, and one of the reasons why it's discussed all the time, is that we want to have a sense of control of the outcome that's not simply just physical, and that's kind of the central, you know, argument there. And I know that you want to say that it's completely physical because you want to associate it with just your specific predetermined set of, you know, values,
No,
essentially.
no, that's not why I'm doing that. Like so, like I
Yeah,
don't
you
use.
said
So
if I hit a
for,
brick on
first of
Fantastic
all,
Cloud's head,
hey
then
Wesley, thanks for joining the chat. But the reason I'm only appealing to the physicals because I don't have evidence of anything else. But so
well,
I
what are
want to
thoughts?
say it again.
I mean,
My
most people
thoughts.
would consider thoughts to be an
Cold
abstraction
neurons
of the
firing in the
physical,
brain.
Yeah.
abstractions of a
So
physical phenomenon.
abstracting doesn't exist. That's why we call it
There's
abstract.
abstractions all over the place in the universe.
No, the abstracts doesn't exist. Like that's why it's an abstract. If it existed, we call it concrete.
What's a triangle?
So okay, so what are you asking? It's like I can draw something in the shape of a triangle and be like, "Hey, this
I
is
think
a
you're.
triangle,"
I think you're making
and
it.
this
This
thing
is
actually
it's an
exists.
example
If you're
of a triangle.
talking, yes, if you yes, to be more specific, yes, if you're talking about the idea of a, if you because it sounds like you're
An
talking
abstraction is a derivative of a phenomenon. You know, like, for
okay.
instance, I'll give you an example. Music,
Okay.
right? You have music on a page, right? You have
I
melody.
wouldn't
You
consider
have.
music an
I haven't even
abstraction.
explained it yet.
That's
I'm talking about
that's
the difference
okay,
between actual physically
but
written
that's
music.
sound.
No, it's an abstraction. So with the actual
No, it's
notes on a
a
page. I've written
sound.
music. I've written many compositions, right? When you write
Uh-huh.
a composition, you write down the melody, the notes, all that stuff on the
Okay,
page.
you're writing down something
that
that
music?
represents the actual music.
It's an abstraction. That's what I mean by that.
So you're writing something that represents the
It's a
actual music,
it's a
but the music is the
representation.
sound.
Yeah, it's just like an abstraction
Okay,
of a model or an abstraction.
but the thing on the paper, the symbol on the paper is not the music.
Exactly, 100%. I would agree with you on that.
Okay, so the music will be a physical thing as well.
The music is a physical thing, and the notation is an abstraction of that. It's a representation on a piece of paper, and the music doesn't actually exist until it's derived from that abstraction. But anyway, that's a different
So
kind of.
I wanted to bring up this study to you. It was very interesting. So it's this guy, this neurologist. Her name is Chun Sing Soon. Forgive me if I butchered that. I believe he's Chinese. Forgive me if he's not. But anyway, so I can't really pronounce his name. But anyway, he's a neurologist, really smart guy. He did this really cool experiment, right? So he had these guys sit in his chair, and they would he would tell them, you're gonna press the button, but when you sit in the chair, you're not gonna know which button you're gonna press. But as soon as you make a decision, raise your hand and then press the button the choice that you decided you were going to pick, right? And so, like, you would say that's a choice, right? Morpheus.
I'm thinking real quick. Um,
Really? I mean, obviously this is a choice. He was saying, "Hey, pick a button, raise your hand."
well,
once
there's a
you
lot
pick
of
the button.
things. There's a lot of things that are reflexive and not choices.
Okay, no. So he's
You
telling,
know,
"Hey, you're gonna."
sometimes choices can take
Okay,
years,
okay, no more
can
Morpheus.
take
Okay,
months.
Morpheus. All right, guy sits
But
in you're sitting in a chair. You have two buttons in front of you, and I say, I want you to pick a button for you to press.
right.
And once you've made the decision, raise your hand
Oh,
and
okay,
then
gotcha. I
press the
misunderstood
button.
you. I
Okay,
apologize. I
that's
apologize.
that's
I
a
thought
choice.
I thought there was a prompt involved.
No.
Okay.
But I was saying that's a choice, right?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So check this out. In the study, they were able to use these scans. They were scanning his brain, and there was all this information in the prefrontal cortex and in the parietal cortex that showed a decision, and the doctors were able to know the button that he was going to press before he made the choice. Isn't that interesting? Do you know how far in advance they were able to pick? They were able to know which button he was.
The study.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the maximum length of time was upwards of 7 to 10 seconds.
Yes, a whole 10 seconds. They could tell you which button you're going to press 10 seconds before you could make the choice.
There's a similar study with Mike Tyson I heard him talking about in terms of reaction time. And I wish I had all the details off the top of my head, but in this specific scenario, they were measuring the amount of time from an external source or an input from the outside to an internal reaction or an output from the human being. And not that it's completely related, but I understand your point. I mean,
so
again,
wouldn't
the reason why I said
wouldn't this kind of like punch a huge hole into like free choices or free will? Because it seems like their brain,
it would seem
your brain is making a decision prior to you making a choice. Like your brain is doing a thing prior to you making a conscious decision.
Sure. Look, if we would have had this kind of point cleared up in the very beginning, I think I would have been on board a little bit sooner. But that's to me, it 100% supports the argument, no doubt about it. But I think when you get into really complicated moral arguments or really complicated arguments in general, where you're dealing with a problem that's multi-tiered and good and bad in many ways on different layers, like, I mean, it by your definition, of course, it would be determined, right? I mean, if determinism was just weighing all the specific variables and filtering them through your through your moral framework. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If it's just weighing all the variables and filtering them through your moral framework and coming with an outcome, then you can always rewind the tape and that calculus will always be the same. If that's all determinism is, then I'm a determinist. But the question, and the reason why I was confused is because when I looked up these definitions, there seemed to be a contradiction between free will and determinism. Now, the way you defined it was free will has to do with multiple outcomes regardless of the calculus. I didn't read it like that. And that's why I think that it's interesting to me. To me, free will has to do with the ability to weigh the calculus and make a choice. Of course, you don't define it that way, which is fine. And in your definition, then that I can understand why you would say that. But I mean,
okay, how
can
about
you
this?
look up the Stanford definition of free will? Look up the Stanford Encyclopedia. It's a very commonly used source. Stanford Encyclopedia definition of free will. I mean, I can look it up if you want me to. But the reason why I'm a little bit kind of off-put here is that determinism and free will. I'm curious if the way you define it is similar to the way they define it, specifically free will. Because that's all I was making the distinction of.
I don't want to be like really, really pedantic, but the Stanford definition of free will is about a 14-page document on free will. There's no
Yeah, same. I was trying to look.
specific there's
trying
no
to find his
specific definition in which they come out and say this is a very concise definition. Whereas, like, if you just do that same thing with like causal determinism, pretty strict definition.
Yeah, I was
So
getting
that's
these
like-
long academic papers, and I was like, "Where's
Yeah,
this
I mean,
definition?"
like I'm currently on the Stanford Encyclopedia of
So
Philosophy. on
here,
the
I'll give you an
page
example.
So, how
dedicated
about this?
to
Okay,
free
No,
will.
how
no,
about
I'll
this?
give you.
Can
no,
I just use a Google definition?
I'm on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Free Will, and this is what it says: the term free will has emerged over the past 2 millennia as the canonical designator for a significant
Just get the
significant
definition. Go to
kind of-
history. Just
right.
use the definition.
This I'm getting to it. It's literally this sentence.
No, just go straight to it.
Um.
Don't get there. Go.
So free will is termed as the canonical designator for a significant kind of control over one's actions. There you go. And that was what I was talking about, was control.
So I think a Google
So I'm not-
definition is so much clearer. So it says on Google, I just Googled the word. It says the power of acting without constraint of necessity or fate.
Yeah, I mean, again,
Do you agree with that?
whether you take that definition or just a
Do you agree with that
significant
definition,
kind
Master?
I'm agreeing with the Stanford Encyclopedia.
Okay, I didn't ask
definition.
you if you agree with the Stanford definition.
I'm-
I'm asking if you agree with the Google
I-
version.
No, I
that-
think I'm going to go with the Stanford Encyclopedia definition,
Okay.
So,
which is
so-
so do you
significant kind of
disagree with the
control.
Google
Kind of
version?
control over
So-
one's actions.
significant kind of control over one's actions. Yes.
Okay. Do you think you have a
So that's
significant control
the
over your
argument I was
actions?
making. You guys
Okay.
were saying that it's specifically just
No, no, no.
mechanical.
Okay, I'm gonna pause you. Do you think you have significant control over your actions? We can use that exact definition. That's the one you chose. That's the one we're gonna go with. Now
Yes,
answer the
I do.
question.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
In what way do you have control significantly over your actions?
I can balance and weigh and look at all the different variables and think to myself, what is worth valuing? And then I can produce
okay, and
an
you
outcome.
got to choose all the things that you weighed.
I got to choose all the different variables that I got to weigh. Yes.
Okay, so all the variables themselves you didn't get to choose.
Again, you guys are making this into this really extremely easy and simple definition. I'm willing
Mainly
to play
because
ball.
it's pretty easy and simple.
It's
in
not.
which-
This is not easy.
like,
this is not
like,
easy. You just said it was a
Let me-
15-page
can I-
document
can
on
I
free
pause you
will.
real quick?
But
Okay,
now
yeah,
it's
I'm-
easy. So
well,
either
I'm-
there's a
it's
15-page
not
document on free will, or
well,
it's
you
easy.
chose the definition, right?
It's not
I'm
easy.
gonna make you abide by it. I'm gonna
No,
ask you:
100%.
did you implement
This is obviously a
any
biased
of the things?
conversation.
Did you implement any of the things that led to your variables? Did you choose when you were going to be born? Did you choose who you were going to be born to? Did you
I
choose
said-
the
so everyone
infinite
rewind
number
back to the
of
beginning.
things that led to this situation?
If you're listening to the podcast, rewind to the beginning.
And
And you'll hear me
You're
say
just
that there's
ignoring
two
the
things.
you're ignoring the
I'm
question.
not. I'm giving
Answer
you the answer.
answer the question. Yes
If
or
you
no?
rewind to the beginning, I said
Answer
there
the
is
question. Yes or no?
deterministic and there isn't.
Morpheus, answer the question. Yes or no? Did
I
you
don't like
choose?
yes or no questions.
I'm well aware. At first, you said that
It has
word
nothing to
needed
do
yes
with
or
me
no
being
question.
right or wrong.
So you said you wanted to use this definition. We're going to use it.
You're
But
going
in
into
order
an
to make
avenue-
a significant control over your life, that or your own actions, that
There
means
are-
that there's a not unsignificant non-control.
I will
and I'm
repeat
telling you-
myself
I'm
again
telling you
for
that
the audience. There are
okay,
deterministic
so,
variables
the question,
and
the
there
question
aren't.
You're just going to refuse to answer.
They're both. No, they're both. It's the same thing I started out with.
No. Like
It is.
So you're not going to answer the question.
I will clip the video where I said, guess what? It's a combination of both. Of course, there's tons of variables.
I'm telling you,
that are
there's
deterministic.
not a combination of both, and I'm asking you to prove to me that your very small portion of this exists.
I'm
I need
just
you to
going
give me
by.
a single example in which you have significant control over your actions.
My
me
cognitive
a-
ability to weigh different options.
How
and
do
come
you
with an
think you
outcome.
got there? You don't think it was determined by
So-
an infinite number of causes and effects that led you to where you are? Do you think you were just magically here and you can change causality? Or do you think that a long series of cause and effect led you to feel the way you feel, think what you think, argue the way you argue, speak the way you speak, read what you read, have emotional attachments to the people you emotionally attach to, have emotional responses to people that had emotional speeches. You don't think that there's an infinite number of things that went into exactly where you are now. You think that you can just cut all that off and in this instance be able to objectively, as almost from a third person perspective, observe and calculate the best course of action to take in a situation. You genuinely are telling me that's what you believe. Because in order to have free will, that's what you're saying.
Done? You've had, what, 2 minutes to
I gave you 5 at the front. What's your point?
Because I already stated what you just stated. If you just rewind the tape, I said this already. You're repeating my argument.
Or no, you done.
You're repeating my argument. What I stated in the beginning. You won't let me talk, bro.
Because you're not answering my question.
Because you won't let me explain it.
I don't need you to explain my question.
Again, so no one wants to go back to the beginning because it shows a contradiction in his point, which is that I've already stated.
You can go back to the beginning and watch the whole show. It's being recorded, bro. I'm asking you to give me an example of one situation in which you have significant control over your actions.
You just spent
give
3
me
minutes
one.
repeating what I've already stated. You
Give
spent
me
3 minutes
one.
repeating what I was stated. So
I'm asking you to give me one.
I'm going to go ahead and repeat what you just stated. If you go back to the beginning of the video, I stated there are a whole series of
I'm done with this. You don't need to repeat yourself. I'm asking you to give me one example.
Agree with me.
I'm asking you to give me an example because that was my question. Are you willing to answer my question? Or are you trying to ignore it? That's all I'm asking.
I'll give you an example.
Because if you're done, if you're done and you're trying to ignore it, we can move on. We can go to something else. We can wrap up the podcast. Okay. I don't care. But I'm asking you a question.
I'll give you an example.
Give me a specific example in which you have significant control over your actions.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So the term free will, based off of the encyclopedia, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, says that you have significant control of one's actions. So we can define significant control as being control over the cognizant abilities of weighing and valuing multiple different variables for an outcome. One example is, weighing
Did you get to choose your brain state? Just making sure, because it seems like that's where you're going here.
For instance, deciding to go and do an exercise regimen at 6 a.m. in the morning at Central Park.
Okay.
You're so many things
you're
would
giving
work.
that as
No,
a
let me
specific
finish.
example,
Let me finish.
Is that the example, or are you still going with it?
I have to give the example why. I haven't qualified it. I just give you. I
don't care why. You said that's a specific example of when that.
So you don't care why, then I don't care why. What you're saying. Either we both care about why, or we don't.
Well, the why is.
I just listened to your why for like 5 minutes. So let me give you my why.
You've ignored me. Go ahead, give me why.
I listened to you.
And then I'm just going to destroy the argument. We're going to be done with this.
Okay. Well, I'm sure it's easy to destroy arguments these days on podcasts. But the point I'm trying to make is there are many different variables in my life that would have pointed me towards not waking up at 5 a.m. and doing an exercise regimen. And there's many different variables that would have pointed me towards doing it. The point is that a decision was made and the outcome was made. And that's significant control, because a lot of people don't have control over their behaviors. A lot of people are driven deterministically. The fact that we have the ability to overcome that determinism, that biological drive, makes us conscious and have free will. That's my argument. That's how most people define it.
Okay, so what makes you think that you chose that?
Why don't you go find? Let's look at our primitive drives as Homo sapiens.
Okay, but
if we didn't have free will, we would just be deterministically being Homo sapiens.
You didn't choose those either. That's my point.
But you choose how to live in the hierarchy.
You choose how you live in the hierarchy? I didn't choose where I was born, to what status I was born in, to what wealth.
I didn't say when you're born.
System,
I said what you're going to do with it. There's plenty of people that are born. There's plenty of people that are born in a hierarchy, and guess what? They either rise to the occasion or they don't.
Okay,
they either do what's right or they do what's wrong.
You don't think the circumstances,
so I believe in values.
The cause and effects that led up to that had anything to do with it?
I believe in value.
Okay, but you
Values.
said value
People
is
have
choice,
choice.
and I don't disagree with people having a
Choice.
choice.
That's what I said.
Okay, but
Then that's the
You ha-
significant
you-
control
you
of your
having a-
choices. That's the definition.
who says you get to
So
control
either you
your
believe in
choice?
the definition or you don't.
Where do
That's
you
the
get? Where do
definition
you
of free
get the
will.
control in? Brett,
That's the
you were
choice.
just saying. I agree. That is the definition of free will. The whole point of this conversation was to determine whether people have it or not to
If we have
determine the
choice or
definition of
not,
it.
right? Well, I'm saying we have
okay.
to start with definitions. Either there's
But
choice
that
or
was
there's
that was
not.
an hour and a half ago. Now we already know the definition. We're trying to determine do people
It's
have
important.
free will?
I mean, in my opinion, if you don't, it's not. To me, it's strange because it's not even necessarily like whether or not. It almost like having it or not is not the important part. It's almost like
It
how do
seems
we-
really
how do
important
we-
when you talk about things like ethics. So I'm curious.
exactly.
Like,
That's the
is
point
it,
I was getting to.
No,
That's the
no,
point
no.
I'm getting to.
It's
not
only
necessarily the
important to
mechanics
you
of it.
when you talk about ethics, but when we talk about ethics, when you talk about ethics, you almost always rely on free will. So my point is ethics and things
Yes,
like that
because that's
aren't
the whole
determined
point.
by free
If you have
will.
if you have no control, then there's no value to a choice. That's the whole
Well,
point.
No. You can't use choice to define value and then say value to a choice.
That's my definition of value. Is a choice.
You said value was
I-
choice.
so-
So there's no choice
It
to a
is.
choice. You're
your
speaking
your
in a
values
negative
are
here.
choice.
You're
So if you
you're
look at my
speaking in a
picture,
negative
it's
there.
funny because no, if you look at my picture, Carl Jung made it very clear. So there's two things here. There's values, which are things we say, right? So here's the I would
So
have
a
to
value
unpack
is
this. It
something
would
you
take
say? I
maybe
thought you said it
5
was
to
a
10
choice.
minutes. You'd have to give me at least 5 minutes to explain it because it's not that simple. The point is
I'm
is
asking
that
how it's relevant to free will because that's the whole point of the conversation.
Well,
We've been all
so
over the board.
if you want to
And
have a
I
genuine
wanna know,
conversation,
you keep using the term value and choice synonymously,
So
and then you say there's no
because-
value to a choice, which means there's no choice
No,
to a choice.
You're not
Right.
following my reason here. I'm
Well,
talking about
either
in
use
historical
clearer terms
context.
or use unique ones.
I can't even explain it. I can't. You're not giving me any chance to explain it. It takes at least 5 minutes to explain it. So there's a
We gave
historical
you 5
context
minutes
here.
at the
So-
beginning of this. That's the whole point.
So that's all I get for these extremely complicated subjects.
No, we've
I'm just
literally
saying
gone
that
back
it's
and
not-
forth, and we're asking you now that we've had an hour and a half to discuss this back and forth, and we put you in the corner so many times. And I'm asking you because
You
keep
put me in the
changing-
corner based off of your definitions.
I'm asking you
When I
because
pulled up
you're
the
using the
actual
definition
definition-
as value to mean choice.
Yeah, I can explain it if you let me talk. There's no way I can.
I don't
it's
need
not
to
that simple.
explain it. I know what the word choice means,
So,
and you said the
no.
word value means
No,
choice.
you don't. There's deeper than that. It's like
Okay,
It's like-
Brett.
it's
So,
like
like
you're
what you're
asking me to
saying is you
explain
have
a-
this really nuanced view of the word choice that you're going to use
well, I'm-
almost semi-synonymously with the word value. You see the problem we're having here? Because now you're changing the
the
definition.
problem is that I
again,
can't.
and we're an hour and a half in.
I'm not changing the definition yet. They're both related.
You said value means choice, and then you said there's no
you seem to be
value
very
without
binary.
choice.
Your views of things seem to be very binary.
No, my
Like
views
black
with
and
things-
white.
well, I mean, I know what you
So
said.
I can explain it if you'll give me 5 minutes.
I
But
know what you
it's
said.
not as simple. It's just like saying like storms are bad, but there's more to it than that. I mean, like
I
so.
mean, is
there's-
murder
there's-
bad?
Depends on your
Is there
definition of
more
murder.
to it than that?
Yes, there is. If
In
you've
what way?
really
Can-
thought
can-
through things.
Can you really tell me in what way there's more to it than murder is bad? Can you give me a situation in
can't be
which
a serious
murder is
question.
good?
Yeah, like for instance, well, it depends on
Okay, I'm
the
ready.
context here, but
Nope.
Anyway,
I'm
let me-
asking
let me
in the
go back
context
to-
of murder.
no.
Give me a
because
context of murder in which murder is good.
it depends on how you define murder. Obviously,
Can you please give me a definition of murder that would be good? Because that's a basic definition of murder in general. Like the unnecessary
there's
taking
been-
of another human's life. There, murder.
well, okay. Well, there's been people murdered, and depending on how you value the actions of the person that was murdered, you may be able to justify the murder.
No, you
No?
might be able to justify murder.
I'll give you an example.
I'm not going to justify murder.
Okay, again, the point I'm trying to make is let's go back to what we were actually originally talking about. because
free
wh-
will in your definition of value to mean choice,
yes.
except
Let me
when
just
you don't want it to be.
I can give you a minute or two explanation really quick. And again, a lot of these things are related to like more complex things, and that's why it's so difficult to talk about this. Because if you want to, if you want to simply look at it and try to like make it a simple binary or black and white thing, it becomes very difficult. But let me just back up real quick. And the reason why I have
Well,
Carl Jung's
can I
point
pause
on
you?
my
I swear
photo
I'll let you finish, but can I
is we'll
pause you
never
there?
get there. Yeah, sure.
I promise I'll let you talk after this.
Okay.
So I would say that determinism and free will are binary. Okay? So when you say things are binary, at least with me, you're right in the instance of free will and determinism. There either is determinism, which means there is no free will, or there is free will, which is absent of determinism.
I said not binary. Did you hear me on that one?
You said that I was binary,
Things.
and I'm saying
I'm
in
saying
the
things are
instance.
not binary.
Okay, but in the instance
Yeah.
of free will and determinism, would you say that they are binary, or are you a compatibilist?
No, because they're. So that's why I was trying to explain my point earlier was that when you were bringing up all these examples of determinism, I 100% agree with you. I mean, that's one of the first thoughts I ever had growing up was predispositioned, or biological predisposition. Sorry about that. Well, that was one of the first thoughts I had growing up because I looked at the outcome of my brother and my sister and myself, and I said there must be a predispositioned or a biological predisposition. In other words, there are lots of things that we can't control, and that's why this is in kind of in the gray. I don't think it's binary. I think most things aren't binary. There's definitely, if you look at a gradient, there's black and white on the very far ends of the binary, but then there's a gradient across that, um, like linear connection. But um, and that's why I brought that up in the very beginning of the podcast was of course there's tons of stuff that's deterministic, and that actually plays a huge role in the outcomes of people's decision making. But you have to leave room for choice, and that's where we differ. Choice and control over that choice is the free will piece. And in the argument that you guys were making earlier, you didn't want to leave any room for choice there. And to me, if you don't leave room for choice, you lose the ability to derive value.
So I want to pause you and go back to my example of the shirt thing. I'm fully committed to saying you have the choice at hand to choose either the red shirt or the blue shirt. I would further say that it's already determined based off of an infinite number of cause and effects which you're going to choose. But the choice is still yours to make. You're as an agent acting upon the shirt. But you have that choice in that moment in the red shirt, blue shirt question. You have a choice. But the determining factors that led to your choice being made infinitely preceded the moment you made that choice. And
Sure.
so your choice was impacted and determined by an infinite number of events, not infinite number of events that led you to that choice. So when you go and you say,
That's a
I'm going to
good,
choose either
yeah.
the red shirt or the blue shirt, you're making a choice.
Yeah, I
But
would agree with you. Like
it's
me,
been
so
determined.
I agree with you. Um, like I would say 92%, right? But here's the thing. What if there's an infinite number, not infinite, but what if there's it
See, I
would be
did the same thing,
finite.
not infinite.
Yeah. What if there's even though it's finite, it's still a large number of deterministic variables.
Sure.
What if there's a huge number of deterministic variables that put you in a situation and you made a decision that's completely opposite of what you would consider to be deterministic? And you
Well,
see this oftentimes, and to me, that's some okay. Here's what I'm saying: you're 92% right. But we, as human beings, if you take away that 8% of significant control over choice, right? To me, we've lost something, And I mean, I know it's metaphysical and it may not sound scientific, but we have to leave space, at least a small amount of space. Like I said in the very beginning of this, there's tons of deterministic variables that go into someone. Like, of course, 100% you're correct. Depending on, even if I was born in America versus another country, right? If I was born to a different skin color, there's all these different deterministic variables. But if we don't leave room for the ability to overcome and be able to choose, even when it seems in opposition to the deterministic variables, to me that's what it means to be human. To be honest, like we're not machines, and that's just my basic counter argument. And of course, you have 100% merit in this. And if we just started out with your original definition, which is just the issue is with how much control you have over your choices, I would say. But you're correct. There's a large portion of that decision that is determined, but there's a
Well,
little
I'm just
tiny
trying to get
sprinkle
to.
of choice there.
Well, so like I don't disagree with choice. I'm just disagreeing with your ability to choose otherwise. Because it's that
Well, I mean, if there's
that's
multiple
the whole.
choice, if there's multiple, well, I mean, okay. So let's just take an example, right? I've got four different numbers in front of me. This is a really simplistic example. One, two, three, four.
Mhm.
To me, the ability to choose, they can't choose outside of one through four. To your point, right? The outcome's never going to be outside of one through four. And if someone chooses one, the outcome's never going to be different than the outcome of one. This is why I said it was a catch-22 in the beginning, because it really depends on how semantical you want to be with this. If it's just a causal relationship between your choice, your preferences, your background, then there is no free will. But if there's room for the ability to make a decision one through four that is in some way detached from the deterministic, we'll say, progression up to that point, then I think you have a decent argument for some sense of free will. I mean, there's got to be
Well,
some sense of free will.
no,
Most
so
people are
that's where I say
determined. I
like
would probably
it's
agree.
illusory because it seems that you have the free will, but like in the perfect time, like and I hate to beat that dead horse, but in the perfect time machine scenario, whether you're doing shirts or whether you're doing pick a number between 1 through 4, there's a inconceivably large number of determining factors on what you end up choosing, and it's not like if you were to go back in time, you would choose something different because your brain state and everything that led up to your choice initially would have remained the same. So you'd always go
Yeah, you're
back to
right.
that.
You're correct. Correct. Yes, but I think that the free will proponents would say it's it's at the point where you find yourself kind of at the event horizon, so to speak, where you have to make a decision and you get to choose which factors you take into consideration. Of course, there's all these factors from your determined life, right? The lesson that you had from your philosophy teacher, the preference you had, whatever, the thing your father said or whatever. But the thing with free will is, as a conscient being, is you get to look at all those different variables and you get to say, you know what? I'm going to take some of these things here and I'm going to listen to those. And I'm going to exclude these other things because I think in this situation, it's best for me to move forward with these. And that piece of
But
information, the ability to, because you're not going to take every single variable into account.
right,
You're
but
going
what
to
you're
take
doing
the
is you're
things
just
that are
moving
the
the
most important for you.
goalpost. You see what I'm
I'm
saying?
not
Like
moving the goalposts.
you
I'm
are.
saying let's say there's
What I mean by that is that
10,000
like by.
deterministic variables.
So can I explain what I mean by that real quick? Because it may not be the best term.
Yes.
So what I mean by that is essentially what you're saying is because I can take things into consideration, right? Well, what's making or what's causing you to take these things into consideration a certain way? Again, it's just an infinite number of things. Like so, for instance, You seem to like philosophy a lot. So when you're thinking about something or you're considering a definition or a word or anything else, you might spend more time pondering on philosophy than an average person that doesn't spend a lot of time on philosophy. But that's because you are your brain state and leading you up to this is from a background of philosophy and enjoyment in philosophy, right? So in your particular scenario, you might spend more time thinking and weighing philosophy more heavily than you might weigh something like Buddhist traditions, right? Like, because they may not be particularly beneficial or may not weigh particularly heavy on how you decide something or what you're going to decide, right? Because you didn't maybe necessarily grow up with Buddhist traditions as a stronghold or a place to go to in your life. So, what I'm saying is, because it's not like the things that it's an infinite number of things that led to even that. So when I say you're moving the goalpost, is you're just pushing it back a little bit. Not only does it impact your decision in that moment, it impacted how you weigh those decisions and what you give weight to when considering those decisions. Because all of that was
I
also determined by an infinite number of causes.
I
Causality
I believe
itself is that.
I believe that a large portion of the outcome, I would say a large portion of your decision making is strictly deterministic, and that there's a small portion of room for free will. That would be probably my position. I mean, it, and the reason why is because you have all these different variables to consider. I mean, I've met so many different people. I've heard so many different lectures. I mean, I mean, we live our lives, and there's so many different things to consider. I don't necessarily think you can't Jesus Christ, you can consider all variables and all thoughts and all things like that. It's just too much. You have to choose to a certain degree, and so like when it comes to a specific topic, for instance, I'm gonna look at all the different things I know and filter it out, and then I'm gonna come to a conclusion based off of what I've decided not to take into consideration, and then I'm gonna make a decision. I'm gonna make a choice. I just think it's important to not throw out the free will piece. I mean, at least I mean, at the very, if I'm gonna just give in to y'all's position, at least can we save a little bit of free will, right? Like I'm willing to take into consideration that 90%, let's say, of what we deal with in the world is determinism, because I believe that 100%. I always have since I was a little kid. I learned that a long time ago because I saw the outcomes of me and my brother and my sister, and the only way to justify or to have a rationale for that is that they just had different biological predispositions. I would consider them somewhat like filters, where the information coming into their brain is filtered without their control, and then their values are based off of that. That's another conversation. The point I'm trying to make is they didn't choose that. I didn't choose I was going to be a good musician, right? It just happened. I just was very good at music, for instance. Just like autistic kids that are savants with Beethoven or whatever piano music, they don't choose that. It's a predisposition, and they arrive to that conclusion deterministically. But what piece they choose to play or some of the other decisions they make, that's why I said I'm not either black or white on this. There's a hybrid version of this in my opinion. It's mostly deterministic, I would agree, like your heartbeat and your respiratory system and the events in your life. And then there's a piece of that which you get to have a little bit of free will on. And
Yep.
that's, I
I
could be
would say
wrong, of course, but
yeah,
that's my
I would say my disagreement there is just that it would essentially kind of pause causality, and I just don't see a method in which that's ever happened or which it could happen, because everything that would lead up to that moment, even if you're an agent, if you will, making that decision, it's because of the influences and because of those things that you're making that specific decision versus like any other quote unquote possibility. But
So
that's
your
my
point
2
would
cents
be
on that.
like, yeah, no, I think I understand your point, which is like, okay, we have three different outcomes, right? You have a causal chain to one, you have a causal chain to two, and you have a causal chain to three. And in what you're saying is that the outcome of the causal chain through one, two, and three is going to is the outcome is going to be a a value of one over the other, basically. So
Essentially,
like
it's a
if you've got
conclusion to the
red and
problem. You know
black
what I'm saying?
shirts and what's
Like
that?
essentially, I kind of like look at it as like a conclusion to a math problem. Like it doesn't really matter like in which order you put the numbers if you're doing like things like addition and subtraction, right? If I say 1 plus 1, it doesn't matter which order the 1 goes in. Or if I say 1 plus 2, it doesn't really matter if it's 2 plus 1 or 1 plus 2. The outcome's going to be the
Right.
same. So just because we
No, I
make
get
those
it,
things
100%.
like more complicated, like it doesn't change the outcome. And that's my viewpoint on it. But I did want to give you.
Yeah, like,
I gotta go in a couple minutes, but I wanted to give you the last couple minutes of the
oh,
show.
okay.
If you want to plug anything, if you want to say anything, you're open floor. You can have 3 to 5 minutes if you'd like, as much time as you want, and then we're gonna get out of here.
Okay. So I guess just to recap my point, um, I would mostly agree with you, and I think that I guess to me it's more of like I would hope that there's some room for free will. I know that's not a philosophical or scientific thing. Hope is not a philosophical or scientific thing, but I find the world to be very nihilistic if you don't have any room for free will. Um, there has to be some ability to intervene and choose a decision that isn't necessarily predetermined, um, mainly because the outcome of a determined view may not be the right one, right? It may be the determined one, but the determined outcome may not be the right one. I mean, I think of people who are addicted to drugs and things like that, and they have an unfortunate circumstance where they're determined to produce an outcome. Some of them are able to figure out a way out of that situation. Similarly to people who want to strive for a higher level of virtue, to a certain degree, a lot of that's determined. But it's the ability to overcome that determinism that I find unique about human beings. And that's why I argue against it, because, or I argue against the assertion of determinism and necessitarianism, for instance. So anyway, I bring that up because maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it's just my um, my belief system to a certain degree. Anyway, you guys all made perfectly good arguments and counter arguments. But outside of that, I think I'm pretty much good here. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast as always. I am more free us 01 on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I have like 4 followers. So anyway, other than that, fantastic facade. I appreciate it. I know you pressed me hard. You always do. I saw your last podcast, man. You did a great job on that one.
I always try to keep
You're
people on their toes,
talented.
man.
You're
I always
talented
try
at
to keep
poking
people on
holes
their
in
toes.
things. I will tell you that.
I try. It's mainly because I'm all the time arguing with AAA in real life. But I really do appreciate you coming on, and as heated as it gets, you're always welcome. We always want you back. Go follow him on Twitter if you're watching, if you listen, if you catch it after the fact. Especially if you like what he has to say or if you agree with him. And then you can kind of pound it out and talk about some issues there, or talk about why you agree. Who knows? You might even want to come on the show sometime, and you can be the tag team against us. So, other than that, next week we have a Joel Inslee, I think I pronounced his name right. YouTube channel is Gospelogian, and we're going to be talking about how to witness to atheist next week. So, as always, Morpheus, we really do appreciate you coming on. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, tuning in. Go follow Morpheus on Twitter, and we'll see you guys next week.